Okay, good morning. And it is morning, it's about 3:30 for those that follow international timelines. So today I'm giving a slightly broader perspective than you may have seen earlier this morning. I'm speaking from the position of a national agency, a national operational agency that delivers environmental intelligence. And this is about taking integrated environmental modelling but actually going the full breadth of delivery from observations through to decisions. And I'll just get my speaker's notes, because otherwise it'll be a very short talk. The little disc in the corner there just gives you the, in very fine writing that you can't read, the breadth of the work that the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia actually covers. So we're Australia's national meteorological, ocean, atmospheric, hydrological, volcanic ash and tsunami service. So we're fairly busy sometimes. So I'm offering you that perspective, but the paper that have been circulated to hopefully all of you on conceptual modelling also gives you a little bit of background to my work in this area. So prior to coming to the Bureau of Meteorology, I worked in the University of Melbourne in the academic sector, and so I'm bringing, I guess, a combination of perspectives there. The academic ideas around conceptual modelling and the application of conceptual modelling and integrated modelling, and then the delivery aspect through the concept of environmental intelligence. So for our agency, environmental intelligence is really about these conclusions drawn from models and observations combined, so integrated, to guide decisions and actions. And we're talking about governments, businesses and individuals here. And our four key goals in our mission statement are looking out for public safety, environmental sustainability, societal well-being and economic prosperity. So some very clear objectives of the end point of our environmental intelligence. So coming from integrated environmental modelling to environmental intelligence. So integrated environmental modelling, a lot of the topics you sort of heard talked about in the early session this morning were about bringing together models from different physical domains, the ecological elements, the social elements and the economic elements, and bringing those together. Now, in our context, moving from integrated environmental modelling to environmental intelligence, we really look at the full spectrum from our Earth observing approach through modelling, through forecasting to the information and warning services. So it's a full, I guess, spectrum, taking the models and actually putting them into use. And a lot of what the speakers this morning talked about were very much about getting that last link, actually getting your models, the outputs from models, used to inform the day-to-day decisions, used to inform policy, used to inform investment. So that's the spread or the scope that I'm considering today. So just some elements of good modelling practice across that spectrum. And I'm looking at this in the process of coming from a research environment through actually taking the models that we develop in the research area through to the actual application and use on a day-to-day basis or a continual basis. And so some of the sorts of excuse me, some of the sorts of practices that I'm sure we'll hear quite a lot about over the coming 2 days are taking a partnership approach in modelling, having very clear and agreed priorities, responsibilities and roles. It's often a little bit challenging and dangerous when you're looking at integrated modelling. People are coming along with their model and they're saying, well, this is the priority, this is where we should be looking, etc., rather than agreeing at a higher level what those priorities are, what the responsibilities of people working on them are, and what the roles are. Some fundamentals about good coding practice. So the requirement of going from a research model to an actual operational model used in decisions on an ongoing basis starts right back at the fundamental coding side of things. So good planning, good coverage of your tests and good version control. So just knowing where you are and where you've come from in the modelling development side of things. It is, I guess, an ultimate goal to create models that are elegant and robust. So that is that they are simple enough to be usable, but complex enough to be useful. And that's, we could spend, well, we could spend, I have spent many conferences with some of the people in this room here discussing actually the whole modelling practice and where is the line between models that are actually usable, can be put into action, can inform decisions, but have enough in them to be useful, but not too much. So there's a very fruitful area for discussion there over the next couple of days as well. And then when you are integrating models from different domains, so as an example, some of the physical processes in the diagram there, also having clearly defined interfaces between models and having adopted standards for exchanging information, exchanging data between models. Then, of course, having actually developed these models in research, we'd like to put them in operations. Now, in an agency such as ours or NOAA, National Weather Service, USGS, those sorts of things that run 24/7 operations, there's a clear understanding that research models are not operational models. They're far from it. Even Jay in the last presentation was talking about getting to the decision, putting a third the effort or possibly even 10 times the effort that you put in research, actually transitioning this into the operational environment, into the decision-making environment. So some of the challenges that you have in this area are actually integrating this with other systems, with upstream and downstream. Now, that can be upstream and downstream data systems, upstream and downstream policy, so coming on the input end to the models. What policies are you trying to reflect as your input to the models? How are you interpreting the output from those models actually in terms of the policy you're trying to inform? So very much being aware of where your model that you're trying to implement actually sits within that full end-to-end spectrum. Transitioning, having staged and controlled transition processes into operations, and a classic in some organisations, and I suspect there'll be some people in the room for whom this is familiar, this thing of fence tossing. I'm a researcher, I've done my model, someone's finding it useful, that's interesting, here you go and deal with it, I'm on to the next interesting thing. Now the person over here who's trying to deal with it is going, hang on, how's this work? So-and-so's not here, they don't know, they're the ones who know how to hook it up to this data source, well they're off doing something else. So that's where the idea, the concept of early life support, having your researcher actually available and involved in trying to use the model in the decision, because it's the model of the developer who actually knows about the foibles of their brand new model baby. And then testing all the time. And then when you're actually in practice, have your model actually being used to provide a service, to provide products to people, to inform decisions about weather or agriculture or anything like that. Really focusing on end users and end users. And look, I won't be the first and I'll be far from the last person to say that you need to be very sure, very clear about understanding what use is being made of the outputs from here. So that's understanding in the operational context the mandate of those who are using the outputs from your models. What outcomes are sought? And in this case, I'm using the policy meaning of outcome. That is a positive impact on a community. What is the impact you're trying to achieve, not what is the output from the model that you're after. What's the actual impact on the community that you're after? What are the priorities then for those organisation or organisations that are involved? What resources are available? Often you'll hear people complain that I can't achieve what I'm after, I don't have enough resources. Give me more resources and it will all be solved. That's approaching things from the wrong end. I'm sure Bill hears that from time to time. Just give me more and I'll solve all your problems. But really understanding, coming back from what outcomes you're trying to achieve, what outputs do you need, and therefore what can you do with the inputs that you have, the resources that you have available to do that, and then having that being informed by policies. Testing and verification. So actually the feedback, closing the loop. Going through an adaptive cycle. So as we apply models, make decisions and see the outcomes, taking those observations and bringing them back in to the other end of the process. And then within that, having that clear loop back into research and development. So to give you an example of where this information is coming from, so here's a snapshot of some of the sorts of things that my bureau does. So we run Australia's most, I think we're in the top 10 of Australia's most popular websites, billions of hits each year. We produce over 400,000 forecast products each year. Over 15,000 warnings and watches for hazardous weather or ocean conditions. We work across the domains of, as I said, weather, climate, space weather, oceans and marine water and hydrology. We forecast cyclones, we do tsunami warnings, volcanic ash, and goes on and on and on and on and on. So you can imagine for an agency that does that with a staff of about 1,500 people nationally, we have a very clear understanding of how integrated modelling must work in the decision-making context. And I'll just run through a couple of our domains that are relevant to where we are today, but also to some of the drought situation within which we're finding ourselves. I was thinking just before that we have the term drought, which implies to people an unusual set of circumstances. So a set of circumstances that are not the norm or not the average or something. What we haven't found is a term to describe the change of circumstances from what living memory tells us, but which we have to live with into the future. Because drought often implies to people, this is an unusual thing, we're going to go back to something else from living memory. Now, we will be moving back and forwards, but I was thinking if we could come up with a term that implied, no, it's a change from what we have known in the past and what our parents have known in the past. Not permanent, but definitely something that is it's no temporary thing. So drought, a term that doesn't imply that the sort of temporariness of drought, but that's a bit of an aside. So in Australia, the Bureau of Meteorology was given a national role in water information in around 2007. At that point, we were probably 8 to 10 years into a national drought, what we call our Millennium Drought. And again, we still use that term drought because we look back at it now. We had 2 wet years after the end of that. Everyone said, oh, that's it, the drought's over. But unfortunately, we didn't go back to normal conditions. And although, thank goodness, a lot of what we have done as a national agency and as a nation coming out of that Millennium Drought live on with us about our changes to water management practices and water use practices. So some of the sorts of products that we've developed in the last 7 years cover everything from Streamflow forecasting, coverage of how much water is in the National Water Bank, looking at desalination and other climate-resilient water sources, undertaking an operational, daily run national water balance on a 5-kilometre grid. I must admit, Jay, I thought you were being possibly a bit of a reach, bit of a stretch when you were claiming that standardisation of units was a success for North America. So we might discuss that one. We might discuss that one. So I'll stick to SI through all my discussions. Streamflow groundwater, water markets. So certainly we've had over quite a number of years now of operating a national water market, trading in entitlements to water, trading in water allocation. So just briefly running through a few examples of that. We now have an operational short-term, this is in addition to flood forecasting, which has been a long-term role for the Bureau. We now have an operational short-term streamflow forecasting that gives you out to 7 days. This is for sort of water managers, but also even the kayakers and anyone who's really interested in river flows can get access to now a daily updated 7-day forecast of stream flow. It's really targeted at river and storage operation. And it does also, and this is a model used certainly in the UK and I think a little bit here, gives a heads up, a warning for our flood forecasters. We essentially have a flying squad of flood forecasters. We have some outsourced in our state capitals, but a core of people in head office. And when we get this sort of 7-day heads up that there's going to be some flood warning work, they pack their bags, they get on the plane, and they go up there, and they're ready to go. So that's gives our flying squad also a heads up. And this is a system that's developing. And again, all of these I could talk all day. You'd be very bored. But this is a system that's up and running now, and it will be public next month. Seasonal streamflow forecasting, this is something we've been doing for a couple of years now, based on our 25-year operational climate seasonal outlook, so a 3-month climate outlook. And this looks at a probabilistic approach to stream flows out to 3 months. We're extending that out to 6 months, or trying to extend that out to 6 months now. And we're heading up, looking up to about 100 locations in the next 15 months on that. We monitor daily over 97% of the water held in public water supply in the country. So we get daily input data from all the major storages, 310 major storages across the country, that allows you to look on a daily basis how much water have we actually got, and how does it compare to last year. Also desalination and recycling, so tracking the daily water production of nearly 600 facilities across the country. So how's our water factories, how are they going? And then, as I mentioned, an operational continental scale daily water balance model. So this gives you on a gridded basis things like your rainfall, soil moisture, and other water balance elements. We have also, and I was talking to some of the attendees last night at a little reception that was held, about a new climate outlook service. So we've been running for 25 years a 3-month ahead seasonal outlook of climate. We actually went back about a year or two ago and started to talk to some of the users about how they were using this probabilistic information. And we found they were actually misunderstanding the way that we were communicating uncertainty or certainty in our forecasts. And so we've actually done a significant overhaul of this service to make sure that all the science actually hits the ground in terms of the decision. It's a dangerous thing to go and talk to the users to say, how did you use my information? They said, oh, well, I did this way, and I did this, and this is the decision I made. And you sort of run and hide, because it's like, no, that's not how you should be using that uncertainty information. So we've had a significant increase in our understanding of how people use our data in decision making. So where are we going? Some of the future services as well. Enhancing our drought information service. So this is a very hot topic. It's a very hot topic here. It's a very hot topic in Australia as well, no pun intended. That what we're doing is there's a lot of money in drought. Drought assistance services are so this is essentially drought payments for farmers. We're the national agency that sort of draws the boundary for the states, that says, this bit's had this much rainfall deficit and this one's had this much rainfall deficit, and they get more money than them. Now you can imagine how upsetting that is if you're a farmer and you actually happen to be just on that side of the line that gets money rather than on that side. So you'd actually like to argue that, no, the boundary should be around there. So we have a significant role in bringing together our data sources to provide the best possible current state information on rainfall deficit, but also looking into using our forecasting the actual break of drought as well. Again, using that term drought, that's a loaded term. So yeah, there's a few examples of the kind of areas that we're looking at, and taking a probabilistic approach to what might happen in the future towards drought break. And then I think probably my final point, the other thing is multi-week forecasts. One of the large gaps that occurs in the forecasting, in the water forecasting side of things and climate forecasting, is that we do that forecast out to 7, maybe out to 10 days if you're feeling good. And then we do a monthly forecast and a 2 and a 3 month forecast, getting out to a 9-month forecast in some situations. But really bridging that gap for a lot of decision makers, it's that kind of 7, 10 to 14 to 21 day forecast that is really essential to some of the, particularly in things like agricultural industries, at certain times of year. that's a significant area for informing decisions and informing better decisions. So that's another area that we're looking at informing. And things like the example there, this January 24 heatwave, this was early onset dryness. So giving a farmer a heads up that in the next 4 weeks or next 3 weeks, you're going to see there's a significant hot spell and your soil moisture is going to disappear. And so giving people a heads up on that is the sort of service that we're looking at. So there's just a small snapshot of some of the ways that we use models, that develop our models and then put them into use to assist decision making. And I look forward to today, the rest of today and tomorrow, to be more involved in this and to hopefully give you a little bit more of my experience as well. Thank you.
Let's make time for one question.
No, don't even need that. All right.
Wow, such a clear talk. Here we go.
So you have this black box that takes data in and sends information out. I'd be interested to know what the flux in and out is.
Yeah.
How much data goes in and how much information goes out on a daily basis.
Sure. Thanks for that. We actually have more than one black box. We have many of them, and there are many individuals that we think of as our point sources of failure in those models. But we literally take in millions of observations a day. So our data assimilation systems are probably as large and complex as actual modelling systems. So on the input side of things, millions of atmospheric, land and ocean observations come flowing in, remotely sensed. We get, obviously quite a large reliance on remotely sensed data. Because one of the important things if you're using modelling in an operational sense is that the better you can get your current state as an input to the model, obviously the better your model forecast can be. So that's on the input end. And similarly, so as I said, on the output end, for example, over 400,000 forecasts a year. So the sorts of things we put out, we're talking the order of thousands of outputs each day through the various media and various channels that we put out our information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.